Alrighty, folks, today we have a double dosage of Nintendo Switch 2 rumors, one of which coming from Insider Gaming, the other coming from reliable insider Xstasis. The first of which is about the supposed three-phase launch plan Nintendo has for the console, indicating a June release. Apparently, a lot of devs still don't have dev kits, so we'll get into that. But also from Xstasis, he is saying that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is not going to show up at the April 2nd Nintendo Direct. So that's what we're talking about today. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo Switch 2 rumors, speculation, coverage, all that fun stuff, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. I hope your morning is going well. So yesterday was a pretty crazy day. We had all of the rumors come out about there being a Switch 1 Direct this Thursday. Sounds like that's still happening. I know a lot of people are still very skeptical of there being a Direct on Thursday this week because they think it'll be overshadowed by the Switch 2 Direct, but that's neither here nor there. I still think it's happening. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning if we get an announcement. I also think it's possible that might end up getting shadow dropped. But if you missed that, go check out yesterday's video. For now, let's go ahead and take a look at this Insider Gaming article from Tom Henderson. It says here, exclusive, Nintendo Switch 2 will have a three-phase launch plan for its games. I'll have this link down below, but just going ahead and reading through it, they say here, with the Nintendo Switch 2 just 1 week from its official full reveal, this year's annual GDC was buzzing with talk around the future of the console. One such discussion was around the Nintendo Switch 2 launch date, which according to people that I spoke to at the event, falls in June. So we'll stop right there. He is saying that he has heard the console is releasing in June. This is a bit contrary to what we've been talking about a lot, right? We've been saying maybe it's coming out in mid-May, and that's still kind of what I lean even with this rumor. Unless there is the Switch 1 Direct and we get some games dated for May, that would, certainly change my tune on that. But June is fine. I mean, June's still really soon. I'm not going to be disappointed if it's coming out in June. Whether or not it's late June, early June, they don't really disclose that here. But saying it comes out in June, that's still so soon. Like, I can't even be mad about that. They also say here, but that's not all. According to various sources, the Nintendo Switch 2 will launch its games in a three-phase strategy, starting with primarily first-party games on launch. According to sources, the second stage will arrive in October to November for third-party studios, most of which are expecting the dev kits for the Switch 2 to be sent in June. Finally, it was said that the third phase for games will be in the holiday period. So this is all extremely interesting to me, especially because I made a video about a week ago talking about the Switch 2 having too many games, which inherently sounds preposterous. It's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean there's going to be too many games? But the idea in the video is that so many third-party publishers are going to be so eager to port all of their games from the PS4 and PS5 era over to the Switch 2 that I was talking about how, like, there might be a worry of there being too many games because certain games in similar genres would step on the toes of other games. It sounds like Nintendo has already baked that into their strategy, which, pat on my back if this is all true, and that actually ends up being what happened here, because it sounds like they want to kind of siphon it so that at launch, I'm sure there will be some third-party games here. Insider Gaming says that most of the devs they talk to were expecting dev kits to be sent in June, but that doesn't mean literally all of them. I'm sure the big dogs like Square Enix, Capcom, EA, Ubisoft, I'm sure they already have them, but maybe more mid-tier developers don't. But it sounds like they want launch to be really focused on first party, as well as I would presume a couple of select third parties. And then over the summer into the holiday, that's when you really start seeing a ramp up in third party ports on the Switch. Which honestly, if you look back to 2017, even though very different circumstances, there weren't that many developers supporting the Switch, that is kind of what happens, where at launch, we had Breath of the Wild and 1-2 Switch. We also had stuff like Bomberman R and Skylanders Imaginators and a ton of indie supports. But it wasn't until, I think, November that we got Doom and Skyrim. In fact, Nintendo didn't have a first-party Switch game that released in November. They put Mario Odyssey out in October, and the 3DS had Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but there were no first-party Switch games in November. They completely skipped that month, and in place of it, we had Skyrim, we had Doom, as well as Rocket League, and I think a couple other smaller third-party games. It sounds like they might be trying to replicate that here, where for the first 6 months, while there will be some third parties, they want you to really focus on that first-party software. And I'm sure some people will look at this and say that's a bad thing. And I guess them limiting options is potentially a bad thing, sure. However, if we're talking about there being a Switch 1 showcase this week and then also a Switch 2 Direct next week, it really makes me wonder how many first-party games does Nintendo have? Because even in 2017, it was just one a month, right? Breath of the Wild and 1-2 Switch for launch. Mario Kart was in April. There was nothing in May. ARMS was in June, Splatoon 2 July, Mario plus Rabbids in August, and then so on and so forth. We basically had one game a month. If their plan is to support the Switch 2 and Switch 1 this year with new software, be that remakes or new games, they're going to have more stuff releasing that is all playable on Switch 2, so I can see why Nintendo would not want it to have a flood of third-party stuff even distracting from their own games. If they're going to have potentially 2 games a month on average, we're talking about more first-party software playable on one console than Nintendo has ever seen before. So them having this 3-tiered approach to their launch, while I guess it could be viewed as a bad thing because they might be limiting what third parties are coming at launch, I kind of view it as a good thing. It means they're being careful. It also means that all of the first party stuff will have room to, kind of breathe. But then more importantly, the third party ports will also have room to breathe. A lot of these franchises and a lot of these games, Nintendo fans have never played. And as I was saying in a video a week or two ago, it was really cool how Doom and Skyrim and Rocket League and all these games had their own pop. They had their own moments on the Nintendo Switch. And I worry if too many third-party games come out all at once, you will likely lose that, and eventually you're going to lose it regardless because the Switch 2 will start getting parity third-party supports, I would imagine, over time. But I think for year 1, maybe even year 2, they want it to still feel special. They want it to be a big deal when a third-party game comes over, even if it is old. For a lot of people, they just play it on PC, they have a PS5, Series X, whatever, but it's still important to prop up those third parties and really give them the boost and the buzz that they need, and just not completely have them overshadowed by a ton of other first-party games, but also other third-party games releasing in a similar time frame. So this 3-phase strategy here honestly makes a ton of sense to me. Now, reading on here, they said, finally it was said that the third phase for games will be in the holiday period. October, November is holiday period, so I don't really know what they mean by that. If we're taking it literally, I guess that would mean December, so maybe we're looking at a first-party game in December. I don't really know what that means. If the third parties will start arriving in October and November, at least for a lot of them, I don't know. I don't get what they mean by that, to be honest. I'm sure, yeah, Nintendo's going to have first-party games releasing in October, November, December. Pokemon Legends EA, we know, is going to be a fall game, probably November, realistically. So I'm not sure what they mean by that. Tom Henderson continues on and says, in addition to the talk of the 3-phase launch plan, Insider Gaming has also learned that select media and creators will be attending Nintendo Switch 2 hands-on next week, where they'll get hands-on with the console and some of its launch games for a few hours. So this is something I've actually also heard from a couple of different people. So there's the hands-on event that you got like lottery selected to go to. That's all starting on April 4th. That's what I'm going to get hands-on because I didn't get like a, creator pass or anything. But apparently there is a creator/media event specifically, people being invited. I assume flown out also, all that stuff on April 2nd after the Direct. So there should be some hands-on previews on either April 2nd, maybe April 3rd, more realistically, before more of the public goes hands-on. So that definitely falls in line with what I've heard. And then he also says, according to various gaming insiders, Nintendo's planning a Nintendo Direct later this week, but its content is currently unknown. So yeah, that is very interesting, this 3-tiered approach to their launch. I really want to know what that third phase means when they say third phase for games will be in the holiday period, but you're talking about the second stage being in October and November for third parties. This also almost implies like a dearth of first party over the summer, which I don't think is going to happen. I think there will be something every single month. So the wording in this is a little weird. They also make it sound like there's no developers with dev kits yet. That's definitely not true. I would assume that's more lower tier developers, maybe lower tier publishers, but even a company like THQ Nordic, I would assume they have dev kits, right? But especially Capcom, Square Enix, Ubisoft, EA, Koei Tecmo, Bandai Namco, like these developers, even if the entirety of their staff doesn't have access to it, they must have dev kits at this point. Even if they haven't had them for 2 years, like a lot of people think, I would imagine they would have started sending these out en masse, or at least starting more en masse in January after the reveal of the console, but maybe not. I mean, I don't think Nintendo's expecting to send out dev kits in June and then magically have Assassin's Creed Shadows pop up in November on the Switch 2. Like, that's not how that works. It will take a little bit more time to get that ready. So for the big dogs, the big AAAs, I think they already have dev kits. What Tom Henderson is talking about, this was from GDC, so a lot of indie devs are at GDC. This sounds to me more like indie tier, maybe AA or even single A studios, but it does kind of fall in line with what I was saying in last week's video about how Nintendo might want to space out all of these games so that each release has its own little moment to shine, so to speak. But then we also have this rumor from Ecstasis suggesting that he's heard Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will not show up at the April 2nd Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, which, It's definitely a little weird to me. I have some thoughts on this. Reading once again from Insider Gaming, link down below. The title says here, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond won't be at Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, it's claimed. According to leaker Ecstasis, the game won't be making an appearance at all during next week's event. Quote, they are telling me that Metroid Prime 4 won't have a presence in this Nintendo Direct for the Switch 2. That's what Ecstasis said via translation. I believe this is like a Spanish YouTuber. So I like how he just says, they are telling me. Who are they? Who are they? Obviously, he's talking about his sources. He then added that he hasn't been told by his sources if that means the game is being delayed out of 2025 or when exactly more information on the game will be released. As with everything, please take the claim with a grain of salt until Insider Gaming can either independently verify the information or an official announcement is made. While Metroid Prime 4 may not be appearing at the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct event, that doesn't mean Nintendo doesn't have big plans. The company is rumored to be holding a separate Direct event this week for games on the current gen Switch. So that's the key thing here. If we're talking about there being a Switch 1 Direct, and apparently Metroid Prime 4 Beyond won't be in the Switch 2 Direct, I mean, you kind of have to put 2 and 2 together here. To me, this would definitely indicate that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will show up at the Switch 1 Direct, which, if true, would certainly indicate to me that this is going to be a full general Nintendo Direct. There's so much scuttlebutt about whether or not it's going to be a mini showcase, a partner showcase. If Metroid Prime 4 is there, even if like that's the only thing, I feel like that instantly makes it like general Direct status. It's not gonna fit into a mini, in my opinion. So if Ecstasis' sources are right here, and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond isn't going to be at the Switch 2 showcase, that to me would indicate it's gonna pop up on a Thursday at whatever this Direct is gonna end up being. It also has some other implications. One, that would mean they're not gonna push it as a Switch 2 game, I would think. However, I was thinking about this. I might have even said it in yesterday's Direct video. Maybe we get this Thursday Direct, and we're talking about why Nintendo's doing this. Maybe they want to have momentum leading up to April 2nd. Maybe this Nintendo Direct ends on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and then they say, like, hey, tune in next week for more. But also that would be contradictory to what Ecstasis said about it not being there, so I don't know. I guess we also can't rule out the possibility that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond isn't going to be a Switch 2 game, right? We all know it's coming to Switch 1. A lot of us have been expecting some sort of next-gen Switch 2 enhancement. I'm not even expecting like all that, right? I'm not expecting it to be like a massive upgrade over the Switch 1 version, but I do think positioning Metroid Prime 4 as a Switch 2 game would greatly help its sales, whether that be as a launch title or even a few months after launch. I just think having it in a Switch 2 box on the shelf would definitely help it and get more regular people that maybe don't know about Metroid. They would get excited. It's like, oh, there's a new first-party Nintendo game on the Switch 2. I just bought a Switch 2. Maybe I should check this out. Whereas if it's in a Switch 1 case, I know this is like so weird to say, but if it's in a Switch 1 case, even though the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, I feel like it being a Switch 2 game would just help it so much, right? If there's not a Switch 2 version, that definitely has me scratching my head a little bit at this point, because I thought the fact that we didn't see it again at all in 2024, and we still haven't seen it up to this point in 2025, I thought they were kind of being quiet because it is going to be some sort of Switch 2 cross-gen thing, but maybe not. There is also the possibility that it's still coming to Switch 2. It'll have a native Switch 2 version, but maybe Nintendo really, really wants to focus on the new stuff in that Direct. Maybe they have this Switch 1 showcase. All these games are backwards compatible. Maybe some of them even have native Switch 2 versions, but on April 2nd, they want to focus on the hardware, the pricing, the release dates, and then Mario Kart, 3D Mario, Animal Crossing, Splatoon, whatever else first-party stuff is announced there. Maybe that's the strategy. They don't want to talk about anything that is playable on Switch 1, except for when they talk about backwards compatibility. I would imagine they'll have a segment on that. Maybe they talk about some sort of boost if there is one. But maybe they want to make April 2nd dedicated entirely to the new stuff, like truly exclusive games for the Switch 2. I guess there's also the very sad reality where Metroid Prime 4 doesn't show up at either Direct. I can't imagine that, though, man. I mean, we're in unprecedented times. We're getting a Direct this week. I never would have thought that. But if we don't see Metroid Prime 4 at all over the next 2 weeks, that's going to be crazy. I don't even know what we're going to think at that point, what happened to this game. But I really don't think that'll be the case. I feel like, be it in the Switch 1 Direct, be it in the Switch 2 Direct, we need to see this game in some fashion. And if we don't, that, I feel like, would indicate it's delayed to next year or something. I don't know. Something must have gone wrong if we don't see this game in the next 10 days. But I do think we will see it. It's just a matter of where they want to prop it up. And I guess if they are going to market it as a Switch 2 thing, it would be there. But if it's just going to be mostly a Switch 1 game, I mean, if it's If there's no cross-gen version of this game, honestly, maybe it still comes out before the Switch 2. Maybe this is our May game, and then the console releases in June, like Insider Gaming reported. That would be a little disappointing, just because, like, even if there is no Switch 2 version or Switch 2 boost, backwards compatibility boost, I think I would still like to play it on Switch 2, you know? It's kind of how I'm feeling with Xenoblade Chronicles X right now, where Monolith Soft, I mean, they're wizards. They did an amazing job with this port, but I am playing it, and, you know, we're days away from the Switch 2 Direct, and I'm like, dang, I kind of wish I was just playing this on Switch 2, you know? So I would hope that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond comes out after the Switch 2, even if it is just a Switch 1 game, but we'll see on that. And then also, talking more about the April 2nd showcase, in conjunction with what Insider Gaming said about there being this 3-phase approach to the release of this console, maybe that does indicate that April 2nd is only first party. If they're not sending out dev kits to a lot of developers until June, and their plan is to have a lot of those games release in the fall, maybe you don't really announce that much third-party stuff here. Maybe like 1 or 2 big things, but really, I think April 2nd is going to be all about the first-party stuff, and maybe specifically about the new stuff. If there's a chance we don't even talk about old Switch 1 games being playable on Switch 2, I'd be surprised if Nintendo was like, yeah, Square Enix, come show Final Fantasy 15, or even 7 Remake or Rebirth, honestly. I think if there's third-party stuff here, it would have to be new stuff, or at least a remake that hasn't been announced yet. Maybe a Final Fantasy 9 remake, or Chrono Trigger remake. I know some people were talking about that recently. Or Persona 6 is, you know, rumored to be coming out or being announced soon. Really exciting new stuff, but not just ports of the PS4 and PS5 gen games that we've already had for years on other platforms. I think April 2nd is going to be almost entirely new, if that makes sense. But we will have to wait and see on all of this 3-phase approach they apparently have, whether or not Metroid Prime 4 Beyond will be at the Direct this week in just a couple of days. I mean, there's a chance where we see Prime 4 in 2 days. That's not too bad. I mean, that'd be pretty exciting. I do really hope that they announce Prime 2 and 3. They say, hey, available now, go download it. Physical coming out late April, and then they end on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and then that's when they say, hey, tune into the Switch 2 Direct next week. I feel like that's just perfect synergy, perfect marketing flow. Like, that'd be so good. So you have the next, week, people are playing Metroid Prime 2 and 3, they're getting hyped up, and then we get that proper blowout at the Switch 2 event. That's how I would like to see all of this unfold. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think of both of these rumors? How do you feel about Nintendo's approach to third parties on the Nintendo Switch 2? And how do you feel about the potential of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond not showing up at the Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. I would love to get a conversation going down below. Of course, you can subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch 2 coverage, Metroid Prime 4 coverage, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my other channel at It's Amiibo. And as always, you can watch me ramble about more Nintendo stuff in one of these videos. Until next time, folks, peace.